Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we speak over this home by the authority of God's word. Let the atmosphere be saturated with peace. Let every door be marked by divine protection, and let every wall carry the testimony of God's presence. We decree rest from battles, light over darkness, order over chaos, and favor in every corner. May this house become a dwelling of joy, answered prayers, provision, unity, and continual encounters with God, where His power abides and His blessings never run dry. The presence of God is the defining factor that turns a building into a habitation of glory, because a house without God is only a structure, but a home filled with His presence becomes an altar where heaven and earth interact. When God fills a home, atmosphere changes before conversations change, because spiritual climates govern physical experiences. Darkness does not argue when light appears, confusion does not negotiate when order steps in, and fear has no voice where the Spirit of God is enthroned. The first assignment of God's presence in a home is to sanctify it, to separate it from common use, and mark it as a territory governed by divine authority. This is why homes that carry God's presence experience rest even in the midst of storms, because the presence of God enforces dominion without noise. When God fills a home, He does not come as a visitor, He comes as Lord. His presence brings alignment, correcting what was bent, restoring what was broken, and rearranging what was misplaced. There are homes where laughter disappeared, not because joy was impossible, but because the presence of God was absent. When His presence returns, joy returns. Naturally, peace flows without effort, and love becomes a lifestyle rather than a struggle. The presence of God sanctifies thoughts, words, and actions, causing the home to become a training ground for righteousness. Children raised in such an atmosphere grow with an awareness of God that cannot be erased by culture or pressure, because they have encountered Him before they learned about Him. A home filled with God's presence becomes a spiritual covering for everyone who enters. Visitors may not understand why they feel calm, why burdens lift, or why clarity comes, but it is the silent ministry of God's presence at work. The presence of God has intelligence. It knows how to confront sickness, how to silence strife, and how to dismantle hidden afflictions that words cannot reach. Many battles that families fight repeatedly are sustained by atmospheres, and when God fills a home, those battles lose their supply. His presence enforces holiness, not by fear, but by revelation, making sin uncomfortable and obedience desirable. The sanctifying power of God's presence also brings order to time and seasons. Homes filled with God experience divine timing, where things happen at the right moment, opportunities align without manipulation, and progress replaces stagnation. This is because the presence of God carries wisdom, and wisdom governs decisions. Decisions made in God's presence produce peace even when they require sacrifice. A home that hosts God learns to listen before speaking, to pray before acting, and to trust before worrying. This does not remove challenges, but it changes how challenges are faced, because the confidence of God's nearness becomes the strength of the household. God's presence in a home also establishes spiritual boundaries. Not everything is permitted where God is honored. Certain pattern cycles and afflictions cannot survive in an atmosphere where the name of the Lord is revered. The presence of God becomes a wall of fire, preserving marriages, guarding destinies, and protecting minds from corruption. Many homes collapse not because love was absent, but because God's presence was ignored. When His presence is restored, even damaged relationships find healing because forgiveness flows easily where God reigns. A sanctified home becomes a place of encounters, not just routine prayers. Encounters reshape values, redefine priorities, and reset spiritual sensitivity. In such a home, worship is not noise, prayer is not duty, and the word of God is not mere information. Every act becomes a point of connection where heaven responds to earthly obedience. God's presence teaches without lectures, corrects without condemnation, and leads without confusion. This is why homes that host God raise people who are spiritually discerning, emotionally stable, and purpose-driven. The presence of God also releases favor upon a home, because wherever God dwells, honor follows. That home becomes a reference point of blessing, a place where good reports emerge, and a ground where testimonies are cultivated. Even in times of scarcity, such homes experience sufficiency because the presence of God attracts provision in unusual ways. Doors open without stress, helpers arise without manipulation, and favor speaks in places where voices cannot reach. This is not coincidence. It is the effect of divine habitation. A home filled with God becomes a place of instruction where the Spirit of God teaches the inhabitants how to live wisely in a broken world. It becomes easier to discern right from wrong, necessary from unnecessary, and eternal from temporary. This clarity protects the family from costly mistakes and wasted years. God's presence also restores sensitivity to His voice, so guidance becomes a lifestyle rather than an emergency response. When God feels a home, direction flows naturally because the guide is present. Such a home becomes a legacy, not just a shelter. Generations benefit from the spiritual investments made today because the presence of God does not expire with time. What is established in the Spirit outlives physical structures and human lifespans. A sanctified home carries spiritual memory where prayers linger, worship remains, and divine encounters leave lasting imprints. Even when occupants change, the atmosphere testifies of God's dealings because presence leaves residue. The greatest gift a home can receive is not wealth, comfort, or recognition, but the abiding presence of God. Where God is honored, chaos submits, darkness retreats, and destiny is preserved. The home becomes a sanctuary of hope, a refuge of strength, and a platform for divine purpose. Every room becomes an altar, every conversation becomes seasoned with grace, every decision becomes aligned with heaven, and every season becomes meaningful because God is not distant but enthroned within the walls, filling the home with light, authority, wisdom, peace, and the consciousness He's whole within consciousness, His nearness at all times. Divine protection over every door and boundary is a spiritual reality that must be understood beyond physical locks and visible security, because the most dangerous invasions are often unseen and the most powerful defenses are spiritual. Every home exists within a spiritual ecosystem, and doors are not only made of wood or metal, they represent access points into the lives, minds, and destinies of the people who dwell there. When God establishes his protection over a home, he places a watch over every entry, ensuring that what is permitted to enter aligns with his purpose, and what seeks to enter unlawfully is restrained by his authority. This kind of protection does not sleep, does not get tired, and does not fail under pressure. When divine protection covers a home, it operates first by discernment, filtering influences before they become afflictions. Not every danger announces itself loudly. Some arrive subtly through relationships, media conversations, or patterns of thinking. The protection of God acts as a spiritual intelligence system, alerting the hearts of the inhabitants when something is wrong even before evidence appears. This is why people under divine covering often say they felt restrained from certain decisions or uncomfortable about certain associations without being able to explain why. It is the mercy of God guarding doors that were never meant to be opened. Every boundary around a home represents jurisdiction, and where God establishes protection, he defines borders that darkness cannot legally cross. In the realm of the spirit, legality matters, and divine protection is enforced by covenant. This means that even when threats exist, they cannot manifest beyond what God allows. Many attacks fail not because they were never planned, but because they were blocked at the gate. This is the unseen ministry of angels assigned to protect, to watch, and to war on behalf of those who dwell under God's covering. These guardians are activated by divine authority, not human effort. Divine protection also works by preserving peace within the home. Strife is one of the most common breaches that weaken spiritual walls because it creates openings for oppression and confusion. When God guards a home, he guards the unity of its inhabitants, making it difficult for offenses to mature into divisions. Even when disagreements arise, they do not escalate into destruction because the spirit of peace prevails. This is not because people are perfect, but because the presence of God regulates emotions and restores perspective before damage is done. Protection over doors also speaks of protection over transitions. Every time someone leaves or enters the home, there is movement between realms of influence. Divine protection ensures that what is picked up outside does not contaminate what is inside. Many people carry spiritual weights, unknowingly bringing home stress, fear, anger, or oppression. Under divine protection, these burdens lose their power at the threshold. The home becomes a place of release rather than accumulation, where heavy loads fall off and strength is renewed. The protection of God also extends to sleep, because night seasons are often when attacks intensify. When God guards a home, rest is preserved, dreams are not corrupted, and the mind is refreshed rather than tormented. Fearful imaginations, recurring nightmares, and unexplained disturbances lose their influence where divine protection is active. Sleep becomes a weapon of restoration rather than a battleground, because God himself watches while his people rest. Divine boundaries also apply to the future of the household. Protection is not only about surviving today, it is about preserving tomorrow. God guards destinies by preventing premature exposure, unnecessary losses, and irreversible mistakes. Many calamities are avoided not because people were wise enough to foresee them, but because God redirected steps, delayed plans, or closed doors that looked attractive but were dangerous. This form of protection often feels like restriction, but it is actually preservation. A home under divine protection becomes resistant to patterns of tragedy. Certain cycles repeat in families, not by coincidence, but by spiritual inheritance. When God establishes his boundary, generational afflictions lose continuity. What affected previous generations stops at the line drawn by divine authority. This is how God rewrites family narratives, not by erasing history, but by interrupting patterns. The protection of God enforces a new order where old afflictions are no longer permitted to proceed. Divine protection also covers provision. Loss, waste, and sudden financial collapse are often symptoms of unguarded borders. When God guards a home, resources are preserved, wisdom is released, and unnecessary drain is reduced. Even when challenges are caused, total collapse is avoided because the hand of God stabilizes what could have failed. This protection teaches stewardship, discernment, and restraint, ensuring that blessings are sustained rather than squandered. The boundaries God sets around a home also regulate spiritual traffic. Not every voice deserves access. Not every influence deserves attention. And not every opportunity deserves acceptance. Divine protection empowers discernment so that choices are guided by purpose rather than pressure. This protects the emotional and spiritual health of the household, preventing burnout, confusion, and misalignment. Life becomes simpler not because demands disappear, but because priorities are clear. When God guards a home, fear loses its authority. Confidence replaces anxiety, not because there are no threats, but because trust in God's watchfulness becomes stronger than awareness of danger. This confidence produces stability, allowing the family to focus on growth, worship, and purpose rather than survival. The home becomes a place of courage where faith is nurtured and hope is sustained regardless of external conditions. Divine protection also sanctifies conversations and decisions made within the home. Words spoken carry power, and unguarded speech can open doors to fear and negativity. Under God's protection, speech is seasoned with wisdom, restraint, and faith. This does not mean silence, but it means alignment. The atmosphere becomes one where life is spoken, encouragement flows, and despair is challenged rather than entertained. The greatest evidence of divine protection is not the absence of storms, but the inability of storms to destroy. Homes guarded by God may experience pressure, opposition, and trials, but they do not collapse under them. There is a resilience that cannot be explained by natural strength because it is sustained by divine covering. This covering remains effective across seasons, changes, and uncertainties, enforcing God's promise that no weapon formed against such a household shall prosper, that every door is watched, every boundary is secured, and every attempt of darkness is restrained by the authority of the one who guards the home, with God ceasing. Peace, unity, and love reigning continually in a home is not the result of perfect people, but the outcome of a governed atmosphere. Homes are shaped more by what rules within them than by who lives in them. When peace reigns, it becomes the invisible law that regulates reactions, responses, and relationships. Peace does not mean the absence of challenges or disagreements. It means the presence of a higher authority that controls how challenges are handled. In such a home, tension may knock, but it is not permitted to settle. Conflict may arise, but it does not dominate, because peace acts as a stabilizing force that restores balance before damage is done. Unity is sustained when peace is enthroned, because unity is not uniformity, it is alignment of hearts toward a shared purpose. A united home does not require everyone to think the same way, but it requires everyone to value the bond more than the disagreement. When unity reigns, egos are subdued, pride loses its voice, and humility becomes the language of interaction. This kind of unity, it protects relationships from fragmentation, because even when perspectives differ, the commitment to oneness remains stronger than the desire to be right. Love is the atmosphere that gives peace and unity their endurance. Love in a home is not merely emotional expression, it is a conscious decision to act for the good of others even when feelings fluctuate. When love reigns, forgiveness is practiced quickly, patience is extended generously, and understanding is pursued intentionally. Love absorbs shocks that would otherwise fracture relationships, allowing the home to remain whole under pressure. This love does not ignore flaws, but it chooses restoration over rejection, correction over condemnation. A home where peace, unity, and love reign becomes a place of emotional safety. In such an environment, individuals are free to express themselves without fear of ridicule or rejection. This safety nurtures confidence, honesty, and vulnerability, which are essential for healthy relationships. Children raised in such homes grow with emotional stability because they learn early that home is a refuge, not a battlefield. They develop the ability to communicate, to trust, and to resolve conflicts constructively because they have seen these values modeled consistently. Peace reigning continually also affects the mental health of the household. Anxiety thrives in chaotic environments, but it weakens where peace governs. Minds become calmer, thoughts become clearer, and decision-making improves. This peace guards the heart against overwhelming worry, allowing faith and hope to flourish. Even during uncertain seasons, the home remains anchored because peace is not dependent on circumstances, but on spiritual authority. Unity reigning in a home strengthens resilience. When external pressures arise, a united household stands firm because strength is multiplied through togetherness. Challenges that would overwhelm individuals become manageable when faced collectively. Unity creates shared responsibility, mutual support, and collective faith. It eliminates isolation, ensuring that no one carries burdens alone. This unity fosters trust, making it easier to lean on one another during difficult times. Love reigning continually also shapes communication. Words spoken in love carry life, even when correction is needed. Harshness is replaced with gentleness, and accusations give way to understanding. This does not mean issues are ignored, but they are addressed with respect and care. Love teaches how to speak truth without wounding, how to listen without interrupting, and how to respond without escalating tension. Over time, this style of communication transforms the atmosphere, making the home a place where conversations heal rather than harm. When peace, unity, and love reign, the home becomes resistant to division. External influences that seek to introduce comparison, competition, or resentment lose their effectiveness. Social pressures, cultural conflicts, and personal frustrations are filtered through a value system that prioritizes relationship over rivalry. This protection preserves harmony even when the world outside is unstable. Such a home also becomes spiritually fertile. Peace creates space for reflection, unity amplifies collective faith, and love attracts divine presence. Spiritual practices become natural rather than forced because the atmosphere supports connection rather than distraction. Prayer flows easily, worship feels sincere, and spiritual conversations arise organically. The home becomes a place where faith is lived, not merely discussed. Peace reigning continually also teaches self-control. Emotional reactions are moderated, impulses are restrained, and wisdom governs responses. This discipline prevents unnecessary regret and long-term damage. Over time, this self-control becomes instinctive, shaping character and maturity. The home becomes a training ground for emotional intelligence and spiritual growth. Unity reigning continually also fosters shared vision. Goals are pursued together, dreams are supported collectively, and progress is celebrated as a family. This shared vision strengthens commitment, making sacrifices meaningful because they serve a common purpose. The household moves forward with clarity, reducing confusion and internal conflict. Love reigning continually sustains endurance. During seasons of loss, disappointment, or transition, love provides the strength to remain connected. It reminds the household that value is not determined by performance, success, or failure, but by relationship. This assurance stabilizes identity and preserves dignity even during hardship. A home governed by peace, unity, and love influences everyone who enters. Guests sense the atmosphere immediately, even if they cannot explain it. Burdens feel lighter, conversations feel safer, and hearts feel calmer. This influence extends beyond the walls of the home, shaping how its members interact with the world. They carry peace into chaos, unity into division, and love into broken spaces. Such a home does not pretend that problems do not exist, but it refuses to allow problems to define the environment. Peace dictates the tone, unity dictates the direction, and love dictates the response. Over time, this governance rewires habits, reshapes expectations, and redefines what is normal. The home becomes consistent rather than volatile, predictable rather than unstable, nurturing rather than draining. Peace reigning continually also protects time and energy. Endless arguments, unresolved tension, and emotional exhaustion are reduced, allowing the household to invest energy into growth, creativity, and purpose. Life feels lighter not because responsibilities decrease, but because resistance within the home is removed. Unity reigning continually builds loyalty. Members of the household defend one another, speak well of one another, and protect one another's dignity even in absence. This loyalty strengthens trust and deepens bonds, making the home a place of belonging rather than mere coexistence. Love reigning continually transforms discipline and correction. Correction is given to restore, not to shame. Discipline becomes guidance rather than punishment. This approach builds respect rather than fear, ensuring that growth occurs without resentment. When peace, unity, and love reign continually, the home becomes a living testimony of what is possible when order replaces chaos. It becomes a place where healing is ongoing, growth is intentional, and relationships are prioritized. The atmosphere teaches lessons, silently shaping hearts daily through consistency rather than force, allowing harmony to remain, not as a temporary experience, but as a sustained reality governing thoughts, actions, actions, and generations, and relationships across seasons and generations. Favor, provision, and answered prayers abounding in a home is the natural result of divine order and spiritual alignment. When a household is positioned correctly before God, resources are not chased, they are attracted. Favor is not merely kindness from people, it is divine influence that causes doors to open at the right time, hearts to be inclined without manipulation, and opportunities to align without struggle. In such a home, help arises from unexpected places. Delays turn into advantages, and what should have failed is sustained by grace. Favor becomes an atmosphere that speaks on behalf of the family, even in rooms they have never entered. Provision in a home under divine covering goes beyond material supply. It includes wisdom to manage resources, discipline to avoid waste, and discernment to invest in what truly matters. Even when income is limited, sufficiency is experienced because there is order. God's provision often manifests as ideas, strategies, and timely connections rather than sudden windfalls. Needs are met in ways that strengthen faith rather than create dependency. This kind of provision removes panic from financial decisions and replaces it with confidence, because trust in God's faithfulness governs choices. Answered prayers abounding in a home is a sign of alignment rather than perfection. Prayer becomes effective when it flows from relationship, not ritual. In such a home, prayer is woven into daily life, shaping decisions and responses. Requests are not merely spoken, they are stewarded with obedience and patience. God responds because the atmosphere honors him, and obedience sustains what prayer initiates. Answers may come differently than expected, but they come with peace, clarity, and lasting impact. Favor also protects a home from unnecessary struggle. Where others strive endlessly, those under divine favor progress steadily. This does not eliminate effort, but it multiplies its results. Labor produces fruit, seeds produce harvest, and time is redeemed. Favor distinguishes the household, making excellence noticeable and integrity respected. Even in competitive environments, such a home stands out without self-promotion because favor advertises silently. Provision abounding also brings stability during uncertain seasons. Economic shifts, external pressures, and unexpected expenses do not dismantle the household, because God's supply is not tied to a single source. When one stream dries, another opens. This resilience teaches the family to trust God as the source rather than systems or individuals. Gratitude replaces anxiety, and generosity becomes possible even in modest seasons. Answered prayers strengthen faith across generations. Testimonies become reference points that remind the household of God's faithfulness. Children grow hearing stories of how God intervened, provided, healed, and directed. These stories build spiritual confidence, making faith personal rather than theoretical. Prayer becomes a first response rather than a last resort because experience has proven its power. Favor in a home also governs relationships. Conflicts are resolved quickly, misunderstandings are clarified, and reconciliation happens with humility. God's favor softens hearts, making forgiveness easier and pride weaker. This relational favor preserves unity and protects the emotional health of the household. Provision also extends to strength, health, and peace of mind. God supplies rest to the weary, hope to the discouraged, and clarity to the confused. Emotional and mental provision is as vital as material supply, and God meets these needs faithfully. The home becomes a place of renewal rather than exhaustion. Answered prayers also refine discernment. As the household observes how God responds, sensitivity to his voice increases. Decisions become aligned, timing improves, and unnecessary detours are avoided. Prayer shifts from constant asking to meaningful partnership with God's will. When favor, provision, and answered prayers abound, the home becomes a place of thanksgiving. Gratitude flows naturally because blessings are recognized and acknowledged. This gratitude sustains humility, ensuring that success does not lead to pride. The household understands that everything received is a stewardship, not a possession. Such a home becomes a channel of blessing to others. Provision overflows into generosity. Favor creates opportunities to help, and answered prayers inspire others to trust God. The household becomes a light demonstrating that divine involvement in daily life is practical and transformative. In times of challenge, this home remains hopeful. Favor reminds them that God is involved. Provision assures them that needs will be met, and answered prayers confirm that heaven responds. This confidence produces endurance and patience, allowing the family to wait without despair and work without fear. Ultimately, favor, provision, and answered prayers abounding is not about comfort alone, but about purpose. God blesses homes so they can fulfill assignments, raise godly generations, and reflect his character. When a household walks in this reality, life becomes meaningful, faith becomes active, and every season carries significance. This is the portion of a home that honors God, trusts his word, and aligns daily with his will, where nothing is lacking. Hope remains alive, and the testimony of God's faithfulness continues to speak within the walls and beyond them.